Hi there, welcome to the latest episode of my 10-minute moan. The topic of this 10-minute moan is this outrageous lie that the SNP just keep selling those in their cult that will listen to any of their nonsense. So the SNP today launched their manifesto, and they are the last party to do so. And they've been promising since their party conference last year that line 1, page 1 of the manifesto would be independence in Scotland. And to be fair, they've done that, because you open up the pamphlet and in the first page says vote SNP for Scotland to become an independent country. Then the rest of the page is blank, which is a bit where probably they should explain how that's going to happen. But they do, however, further on in the document, I'll just get the page number, is page number 9. And they talk about how they're going to make independence happen, but they don't. There's a one page, and in one paragraph, they explain what's going to happen, because they just keep saying, vote SNP and we magically get independence. And what they've said is, at this election, we are asking you to vote SNP for an independent Scotland. If the SNP wins a majority of seats, Scottish seats that is, the Scottish Government will be empowered to begin immediate negotiations with the UK Government to give a democratic effect to Scotland becoming an independent country. So let's dissect what they're actually saying here. Now, this goes back to Sturgeon about 2.5 years ago, when she lost a court case for a referendum, and she just was going to just have one. And she was proving that she couldn't just have one. So she took to the streets of London and she declared that the next Westminster election, which is what we're competing for just now, would be a de facto referendum. And in her words, and in her notion, this would mean if the Scottish voters voted 50% plus 1 in favour of SNP, then that would give the Scottish people a mandate for a referendum, or indeed independence, depending on what way and what day you listen to her. Now, that to me, as a unionist, I didn't like it, because I thought it sounds like a possible route to independence. And to be fair, if the Scottish public did vote 50% and over for the SNP, then very few could argue that there wasn't a majority notion for independence. And whether that led to a referendum or instant independence, we would obviously need to see what Nicola had decided that morning when she woke up. But it was impractical, totally impractical at the next Westminster election that they would get anywhere near 50% of the vote, because the amount of scandal that was about then, and since she opened her mouth about this de facto referendum, the situation's got worse. So the amount of voters leaving the SNP is at an all-time high. So then came along Humza, and he said his notion for a de facto referendum, or whatever you want to call it, was the majority of seats. Now, you could get the majority of the seats, which would be 29 now in Westminster. You could get the majority of the Scottish seats with 29 seats, which they've had often. But to do that, you could do that for as little as 30-odd% of the vote. So what Humza said at the conference was the exact same as John Swinney said last week or the week before, and the exact same as they say in their manifesto. Their route to independence is get the majority of seats of Scotland, and then it'll just sort of happen, right? What would really happen, this is a bit they don't tell you, and they sort of suggest here that there would immediate negotiations with the UK government. Well, let me explain to you how those negotiations with the UK government would look. You would turn up there at Westminster and speak to whoever the Prime Minister was at the time and say, we've got the majority of the seats in this House, we demand a referendum, or we demand independence, whatever route you want to take. And they would laugh at you. And quite rightly so. Because if your demands are there and you're trying to weight that with 30-something% of the vote, quite rightly, you'd get horsed out the door. And then what would happen is we'd get this rewind circle regurgitated again, as we always do, because SNP would then claim that Westminster is stopping the democratic right of the Scottish people, because that's what they do. Totally oblivious and totally ignoring the fact that it would have been 30-odd% of the Scottish population that voted for them. So this notion that they're going to gain independence through getting 29 seats or more is total nonsense. It's impractical, it's unachievable, and would fail. Because nobody would even tolerate your notion of having another referendum where as little as 30% of the vote. And quite rightly so, because you're crackers. Then they would argue, but look, we got some Green votes and we got some Alba votes. Well, that's true. But the Green Party are a, what do you call it? Conservation party. That's their number one aim. They just would vote for independence. But they're not an independence party. They're just a party that quite like the notion of independence. So lots of people, or people should be voting for the Greens if they're environmentalists, and that is their main driver. So if you want to count in the small amount of numbers it would be for the Green Party, then you're still telling lies. So we're in this position now where I'm actually starting to feel sorry for nationalists. But there's a lot of nationalists I have no pity for. Well, I do have pity for them, that's all I have for them. And that's the crackpots that buy this shite. And that's the crackpots that tell you, but that's what Maggie Thatcher promised us, when I've already debunked that in a video I put out last night, and I'll put the link to it up here at the end of the video. You know, so they just talk absolute shite, and they get absolute cranks to buy into it. And anybody who actually genuinely wants independence and reads this manifesto and thinks that's going to lead to independence, well, you need to call somebody, maybe a doctor or a nurse, right? Because that's, you can't read that in these unless you really, really want to. And that's the problem we've got just now. There's some people that, there's lots of people who want independence, right? But there's some of them absolute cranks, and they will not actually, cannot see the wood for the trees in front of them, right? They will believe anything, and they'll say, that's it, so we vote SNP and we get independence. I've got news for you. No, you won't. The closest you ever got to it was 10 years ago. You're nowhere near that now. The reason you're nowhere near that now is the amount of people voting for SNP is reducing every day, and you have totally incompetent leaders. It was Alex Salmond that got you closest. He's long away. He's well away. He's that far away from you, he started his own party, right? So, you don't have the leadership to do it, because since then we've had Nicola, who's, you know, she did fool a few people to start with, a lot of people, and more people, day by day, are coming to the understanding that she was a crank, right? Then you had Hamza. He couldn't manage a Minaj, that boy, right? And now we've got John, who's just a sort of bastardisation of the aim altogether, right? That's all he is. He's got no leadership whatsoever. He's just like a wet glove, this boy, right? He's totally annoying and useless. He's as much use as a chocolate fireguard, right? He's rotten. And he is just trumping out the same shite that his predecessor did about this way to Scottish independence by voting for them. They'll get the majority of seats, and then they'll somehow go down and negotiate with UK government. Now, anybody who writes this nonsense actually know how the outcome of that would be before they actually do it. The same has been time when we challenged the GRR bill, the same time we challenged the call for a referendum, all this stuff. The SNP actually know that when they enter these notifications, they know the answer, they know the result, and then they turn that to try and say, bad Westminster, well, up until the 4th of July, it'll be very bad Tories, right? It's just total shite. And they get away with it. But the cult, and I'd have no problem calling them that, because that's all you are. If you're still firmly, you know, one of these SNP can do no wrong. Somebody says something wrong about bad about SNP, and it's, but Westminster, but Tories, right? Stop it. Stop it, because you lose your argument as soon as you do that. As a bystander, it's a bit embarrassing for you, to be perfectly honest with you. You know, that notion that they cannot see any wrong in this party that's been in power for 17 years and wrecked Scotland, right? They can't see anything wrong. You see anything about Nicola Sturgeon, Hamza, John Swinney, their policies, anything at all, and the first words that come out their mouth will be a sentence that will include either Tory, Westminster, Brexit. Right? And you put out stuff about scandals with them, and it's, but what about Michelle Mone? Right? You put out a scandal about them, but about Douglas Ross. Well, what about them? It's your party that's in the power in Holyrood, so it's your party that will get judged. And if your defence is, but we're not just as bad as Tories, or the Tories stole a wee bit more, or the Tories are a wee bit more incompetent, or the Tories claim a wee bit more expenses than us, then that's a pretty shite argument, because you've been telling us for 17 years that the Tories are the devil incarnate, right? Now, if you're just a wee bit better than them, somehow that makes you all right. It doesn't. It only makes you all right in the mind of the most cultish of the cult that remain loyal to you. And here's another thing. Even those inside the party, some of them can see it. And here's a prediction of what's going to happen after the election. You're going to get a load of SNP MPs with no job, right? And that's when you see really what's going on in their party, because these people, when they're not connected to them anymore and they're not reliant on their 90 grand wages, right, the job they've got at Westminster and the strength of the yellow rosette they had, and those ones that actually know it's not a good thing are free to talk, they'll start talking. And I think it would be funny, right, because if they still want to be politicians, they're not going to go and join the Labour Party or the Tories. Very, very, very few of them done that. You know, they're talking about a handful do that, right, over a large period of time. So the only home they've got, if they want to remain as politicians, is Alba. And I would really, really laugh at that, because you'd have a wee queue forming to try and get into Alba, and then it'd be that sketch out of Chewing the Fat. Good guy, wank, 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 good guy. That would happen. And Alba go, you, do the toes, you're no bad, in you come. You, Tadger, beat it, you, no bad, in you come. And they will try and build, and I have no problem with this as a unionist, they will then try and build the independence argument from almost, not a standing start, but, you know, a relatively fresh start. And really, it'll be fun seeing the rewriting the history with some of them, trying to slide out to the only option they have, which would be Alba. So, good Scottish people that don't like SNP, and I'm not just talking about unionists here, because there's a lot of nationalists don't like SNP. I've spoke to many of them, and I'll continue to do so. And so the good people of Scotland, if you're fed up with this shite, if you're fed up listening to this nonsense, if you're fed up with the total predictability of the Scottish National Party, then tactically vote them out. Tactically vote them out, bankrupt them, and make them so inadequate and insignificant, or potentially dead, that they can't trouble these shores again. And that is for unionists and nationalists that are sick of them. So if you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you've not already done so, please consider subscribing. And unless you are the SNP or any other cult remaining never say die survivors, everybody else, have a great day. Cheery bye now.